You wanna know what's funny? We were told if we just went to college, got good grades, and worked hard, we'd be fine. We'd buy a house, start a family, maybe even retire comfortably one day. That was the deal, right? Except that deal is dead, and everybody knows it. The average age of a first-time homebuyer in America just hit 40 years old. 40. Let that sink in. Our parents were buying houses in their 20s. We're supposed to wait until we're middle-aged now. Just a few years ago, this number was as low as 32. Now it's all the way up to 40. And with that, wages haven't kept up with inflation in decades. Real wages adjusted for inflation have barely budged since the 1970s, while productivity has increased by 77%. People are working harder than ever and making the least amount they have ever made. Corporate profits are at record highs, while companies are laying off thousands of workers to boost stock prices. In October of 2025, we actually just broke a record, a 22-year record for the most layoffs in 1 month, or announced layoffs in 1 month. So you have the stock market at record highs. You have companies making the most amount of money they've ever made, but yet we're cutting employees to make even more money and boost our bonuses, not our bonuses, the CEO's bonuses, and pad their pockets. Insane. The job market's an absolute nightmare right now. Companies are asking for 5 years of experience for just an entry-level position. If you can even find that position or a posting that actually is in your field and industry that isn't overcrowded with thousands of quick applies. Oh yeah, and by the way, most of these positions are paying $45,000 a year starting. And the rent in the cities that they're requiring you to move to, $2,000 to $2,500 a month. Insane. And the political system we're currently in, you're not getting spared in this conversation either. Both parties are run by people in their 70s and 80s who own multi-million or billion-dollar companies, multiple real estate firms, have hundreds of houses, themselves own multiple homes. And do you think they've applied to a job? Yeah, okay. Majority of their jobs stem from nepotism and being lobbied by their buddies. You think they've ever had to worry about student loan payments or housing affordability or even being able to afford food now because SNAP benefits have been frozen for over a month now. So yeah, things are pretty broken. And we all know that. I'm just stating the obvious. But here's the question nobody's asking. What is Gen Z's solution to this? Because let's be real, complaining about it online isn't going to fix anything. Waiting for politicians to save you isn't going to work either. And pretending everything will magically get better if we just work harder is pretty delusional. So today I want to lay out the actual problems we're facing with real data backed behind it, not just talking about vibes. Let's talk about the actual solutions. What are they? How can we achieve them? Not just individual life hacks, but real systematic changes that need to happen and what we can actually do to make them happen. It's not going to be a comfortable conversation. All of these solutions aren't going to be a one size fit all thing. Some of you may even disagree with parts of this, and that's completely fine too. Like I just said, not every single problem has one solution. There are multiple ways and scenarios out of this situation, but I am going to talk about proposed solutions, and maybe we can have a discussion in the comment section or in my Discord server about what will actually cause change. I just think we need to have an honest conversation about where we are and what needs to change, because our generation is getting smacked around. We are absolutely cooked right now. So let's start with the problems. First of all is the housing affordability and the housing crisis. The average age of a first-time homebuyer in the United States now being 40 years old. By the way, in 2021, this age was just 33. We've added almost a decade to the timeline in just 4 years. The average sale of a home price, by the way, right now is over $512,000. Meanwhile, the real median household income in the United States, according to the Federal Reserve Bank, is just $83,000 a year. That is household income. So in order to get an average house in the United States, your household is paying over 6.1 of their annual earnings just to afford housing. The down payment on one of these homes, a 20% just normal down payment, $102,000. And that's all assuming you can actually save that amount of money. Because rent has exploded, grocery prices have exploded, child care costs have exploded, health care costs have exploded, insurance premiums are about to explode even more, college tuition has exploded. And here's the thing nobody wants to actually admit. This isn't just an accident. Home prices are high because housing has been turned into an investment vehicle for the wealthy. So yes, we are literally allowing America to commodify housing and profit off of basic human necessity. And I could go on this conversation for hours and make an entire in-depth video talking about housing in America. I really could, because it's not just this. We have institutional buyers. We have foreign investors buying records amount of homes. We have zoning laws preventing new housing construction in the exact cities where jobs are located, like San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and even just around those metro areas. 75% of residential land is owned exclusive for single-family homes, making it illegal to build condos, apartment buildings, or multifamily housing, which would actually put less strain on these major cities. And by the way, by the time Gen Z even reaches the age of 40, this number is going to go up even further. The system is working exactly as it's designed. It's just not designed for us. And now we can talk about wages, because everyone loves to say, just get a better job. Like that solves anything. On one of my last videos, the one you probably even subscribed to this channel from, a lot of the comments were just saying, move, just make more money. You're overspending. Just move out of the major city. And yes, I do live in New York City, but that is where jobs are located in. We are in one of the worst job markets in history, especially for new grads. And I am a new grad. I graduated within this last year. I moved to New York just because of this job. And for now, that is my situation. And this is a better situation than most because a lot of new grads aren't graduating with a job, are living with their parents, probably working retail jobs. And that just leads me into the federal minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. I'm sorry, but this being unchanged since 2009 is absolutely ridiculous. To live comfortably in the United States, the National Low Income Housing Coalition says you need to make about $33.63 an hour, which I'm not proposing that we make that the minimum wage because that would honestly be insane. But even just increasing the minimum wage to around $15 to $20 an hour would make that number much more feasible and actually obtainable. And I already know some of the comments in the comment section are going to be, if we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, everything gets more expensive. That is not how things work. It is much more complex than that. And also, if you look at the correlation between wage hikes and wage inflation to general cost of living inflation, the correlation is very weak. In fact, companies and organizations should be able to absorb these costs because of increasing productivity, reducing turnover rate, slightly lowering their profit margins, and obviously using technology and efficiency gains effectively. So pretty much all in all, if corporations were less greedy, we would actually be able to have a livable housing situation. Instead, we're stuck and trapped in survival mode. And if we actually measured worker productivity gains compared to minimum wage, and let's say you were paid based off like your productivity increase, the minimum wage today should be around $26 an hour. So you were saying that the average minimum wage employee is earning a business $26 an hour. Meanwhile, they're getting paid $7.25. Those aren't even stagnationary wages. That is generally just going backwards. Like that doesn't even mathematically make sense. Let's get off of the topic of minimum wage because most of us aren't making that. Realistically, let's talk about entry-level professional jobs, the kind you kind of need a college degree for. The average starting salary for a college graduate in 2025 is just $68,000. Your take-home pay would be around $51,000 after taxes, and that's with the average state tax, which majority of these jobs are actually in higher tax bracket states. So this is overstating it, which at an hourly rate after tax is around $24 an hour. And of course, if you were to adjust this for inflation, adjusting it for productivity gains, adjusting it for housing costs, higher tax rates, higher grocery prices, higher cost of living, increases in car insurance, increases in healthcare. It's not a livable wage. You're honestly just on basic survival mode. And that is why the average consumer is extremely strained right now. Wages have been virtually stagnant for around 25 years. Meanwhile, the cost of living has increased exponentially. For example, in the 1980s, in order to go to college, the average public university costed around like $10,000. In today's dollars, by the way, that's adjusted for inflation. So it was a lot lower back then. And they made around $17,000. And if you adjusted that into today's dollars, that's $60,000. So you graduated with college debt that was equal to about 17% of your starting salary. And you could realistically pay that off in a few years. Today, the average cost is over $104,000. Meanwhile, the average starting salary was only $68,000. We're not talking about home prices, food prices, or increases in anything else. We're just talking about college. That's disgusting. You're underwater before you even started. And some of the comments in that one video really ticked me off, man, because when people just just say Gen Z needs to work harder, I want you to understand what they're actually saying. They're saying we should work harder than our parents did, than our grandparents did, than at any point in history. You need to be more productive than ever before for lower real wages, while everything else has exponentially rose in price. Oh, and the house that you were expected to buy when you like graduated, got a good job, paid off your student loans and everything, yeah, you're gonna be about 40 when you're actually at that age. Maybe even later, because that's using today's age, not when we're that age. So when people say Gen Z lacks work ethic, it just means that we're really good at math and we actually understand that, oh my God, this is a genuine scam. Now we can talk about the job market, because even if you wanted to get a better job, the job market is actively hostile towards young people. Here's what applying for jobs looks like in 2025. You pretty much need a bachelor's degree for any entry-level position, or at least most of them. But then you also need 3 to 5 years of experience for a job that's labeled entry level. You have to apply through some garbage applicant tracking system that auto rejects your resume if you don't have the exact keywords they're looking for. But then you also get screened and have to do either a quiz or an assessment. And then if you work in anything technical, you get a technical interview that's going to screen your application out even further. If you don't get an 80% success rate on these assessments, you're pretty much cooked. For example, in 2025, for the average job posting, it receives over 250 applicants. And out of that large pool, only a couple get chosen for an interview. And then obviously only one gets chosen for the job. And that's just for the average posting. We're not even talking about internships or co-ops, because I've seen job postings get over 250,000 applicants. For example, the internship program that I went through had over 150,000 applicants. When I applied, it was only 80,000. Now it's at over 150,000 just a few years later. How are we supposed to compete in this market? You're not going to hear back from 99% of the jobs you apply to. And the fact that we're even doing 3 rounds of interviews now for jobs that used to only be 1 round is insane. My friend was given a take-home project that took over 10 hours for him to do just to get ghosted later. Like, he built a full stack application and then just gets ghosted after 10 hours of free labor. Like, insane. Like, what is this? Like, I don't even know like what this is getting into, honestly, at this point. And even if you did get hired, let's just say you got extremely lucky, because that's what it takes. It takes a lot of luck. It's a lot of strings of luck in a row. Even if you did get hired, there is zero loyalty within companies anymore. You think a company like is willing to invest in you and actually value your work and your productivity that you're providing? Absolutely not. Because if quarterly earning reports come in a little bit in the red, or just not as high as expectations or the market wants, boom, layoffs are getting announced. Even if you beat earnings, we're announcing layoffs. Corporate profits are at record highs. Stocks are at record highs. CEOs and executives are making more money than they have ever made in their entire lives, ever in existence, actually. But yet we're still at record high for layoffs, hitting a 22-year high in layoffs. Insane. You are not a valued employee anymore. You're literally just a cog in the machine. It's always been like this, yes, but now it's even more prevalent than ever. And this isn't just something that's happening right now. This has been happening for the past few years. Since 2022, we've been hitting higher and higher layoffs year over year. Like, for example, these aren't struggling companies. Like, I know people like to say that, oh, they laying off for a reason. They're really not. It's not a valid reason. It's just to pad their pockets with more money. For example, the Meta layoffs, the Google layoffs, the Amazon layoffs, they're making record multi-billion dollar profits, and it's still not enough for them. Wall Street is literally rewarding the average person suffering just to get a couple extra dollars on a stock. And when they do layoffs, CEOs get massive bonuses for hitting profit targets. Workers are literally just a number on a spreadsheet at this point. And that is why loyalty within companies are dead. We don't get pensions anymore. The 401k matches are a joke, and wealth inequality is at the widest it's ever been. Do you think a CEO works harder than the average person? Absolutely not. Do they deserve more money than the average person? Of course, because it's their idea most of the time, sometimes, not all the time. And I'm not saying that they should be paid the same as the average worker, but I think when it's over 400 times the average worker's salary is crazy, because the average person is closer to being on food stamps and impoverished than they will ever get to be than being just comfortable and wealthy. Or not even just wealthy, just having any sort of freedom. A lot of people are just one paycheck away from poverty, yet freedom and flexibility is something that is the farthest thing from you. If you decide to take any sort of risk in your life, and this risk is different for everybody, so I can't just label a specific one, but let's just say an average 25-year-old. They want to have a kid. That could be seen as a risk for them. You are literally asking to shoot yourself in the foot, and you're asking for your basic necessities and affordability to literally go in the toilet. Also, by the way, I already know some comments from this conversation. They're going to be like, oh, but nobody wants to work anymore. Because I heard that in 2022 when the job market was just starting to get bad, and it was something that was insane to me. It wasn't that we even had a labor shortage or that nobody wanted to work anymore, because that is literally corporate and company propaganda to put the blame on you and to put the blame and shift towards automation and AI. Because people will say 2022 we had a shortage of workers, right? And yes, some companies actually did. Some specific locations did have labor shortages. I'm not going to take advantage or take away of that. But on a wide scale of a company, we were not at shortages. Companies will literally turn around and say, nobody wants to work anymore. And you believe it. Like, you are literally being a suck up to these big billionaires and CEOs and corporations. They'll feed you any sort of propaganda that makes you target another person, another worker, another working class citizen, but yet you believe them and literally will just be a massive suck up for them. Because in the background, it's not about finding a qualified candidate anymore. They're rejecting thousands, tens of thousands of applications from qualified people because they want somebody to work for less wages for them, just so they could make more money. Some people call this late stage capitalism. I just call it pure greed, because that's what we are getting into. We are literally in greed overdrive. We have never had this level of corruption and greed before. And yes, we've had corruption and greed in the past, but now we're at records high of both of those things. And Gen Z cannot be competitive with this. Corporations know that they can just extract more profits by hiring less and less people, paying them less and less, making them work harder and harder. And if you burn out or quit, there's 300 plus other people just waiting in line to take your spot. So naturally, we'll turn to the political system to fix these problems, right? That's how democracy is supposed to work. You elect representatives who solve systematic issues. Except the political system is run by people who don't experience any of these problems. The median age for a US Senate is over 64 years old, and the House of Representatives is just over 57 years old. Our current president is 79 years old, and he still has another 3 years. These are people who bought their original homes for less than $50,000. They went to college when tuition was probably only $1,000 to $2,000 even a year. They got jobs by walking into an office and just handing a resume. They have government level healthcare and pensions. They do not understand what it's like to be an average 25-year-old in 2025. I'm not saying this to be ageist. I'm saying this because the incentives in our political system reward people who've been in power for decades, not people who understand what young people are actually going through. For example, the congressional approval rating is actually at historic lows. And this is kind of on us, honestly, too, at this point, because House re-election rates are at 96.6%. I'm sorry, but who is re-electing these people? What are we doing? Oh, wait a minute. It's not really our fault, because the system is designed to protect incumbents. Our government is gerrymandering campaign finance laws that favor wealthy donors and party structures that punish any other political opponent. For example, we haven't passed any meaningful legislation on housing affordability. They've honestly never even addressed the wage stagnation. They haven't fixed student loans in any substantial way. They haven't done anything about corporate consolidation or monopolies. They haven't made healthcare more affordable in any way. They haven't addressed climate change in any serious way. And I know that's a debatable topic that some people don't even believe in, which is insane to me. Both parties are actually funded by the same corporations and wealthy donors who benefit from the current system. There are a bunch of reports even talking about the influence of super PACs and dark money in the last year's campaign. And it's funny because Democrats talk about helping the middle class while taking money from Wall Street, right? Republicans talk about the free market while giving subsidies to oil companies and defense contractors. But yet we can't afford any form of universal healthcare. We can't afford free college. We can't afford paid family leave. We can't afford any affordable housing programs. The current system isn't designed to solve our problems. It's designed to preserve the wealth and power of the people already at the top. And I just scratched the surface on many of these issues. There's still a ton more. So many things that I didn't even address. But I'm going to say you're an informed viewer and you know about these other issues, because this video will be hours long if I actually addressed every single issue in our government. So let's talk about the actual solutions to these things, right? What are the paths to actually solve these issues and actually have meaningful progress? Everything is broken. We've established that, and that's completely understandable. Housing is unaffordable. Wages are stagnant. The job market is hostile. The political system just doesn't work. It doesn't work for us. So what are the actual solutions? Let's talk about some systematic changes that need to happen if we want society that actually work for young people. So the first solution I want to talk about is housing being a right, not an investment. The fundamental problem with housing in America is that we've turned it into an investment vehicle instead of treating it as a basic human necessity. Here's what's something that needs to happen. We need to heavily restrict corporate ownership of single-family homes. That is the first thing that needs to happen. There is no reason companies like Blackstone should own over 300,000 homes. These housing should be for people to live in, not for Wall Street to extract rent from. Several cities and countries are already doing this. Like, for example, in 2023, Canada banned foreign investors from buying residential property for 2 years. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. Berlin, Germany capped rents at inflation and is also in the process of buying back from these corporate landlords. We could do something similar. We could do something even on the same level. For example, if we just reform zoning laws to allow more housing construction, this would change housing affordability entirely. And that's just one little change. I'm not talking about the other ones I just talked about. I'm talking about just the reforming of zoning laws. In major metro areas and in major cities across the United States, this is the main reason. It's because we've made it illegal to build enough of it. We need to legalize multifamily housing, eliminate single-family only zoning laws, and allow developers to build more affordable units. Minneapolis even has a 2040 plan to not completely eliminate single-family zoning, but to restructure it. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a step in the right direction. We can even look at other major cities around the world and be like, what are they doing? What can we extract that's working in their environments? It's like a little case study. We have free case studies all over the world. Why aren't we extracting that information and turning it into an American policy? For example, build social housing. Vienna, Austria has 60% of its population living in high quality apartments owned by subsidized housing and are rented at below market rates. They are repeatedly in the top percentage for quality of life. And this isn't a program that's just housing for the poorest, because that's what a lot of people in America or a lot of politicians try to aim at or try to go towards. They're like, let's try to get housing for the poorest 10% or the poorest 5% or whatever that percentage is, right? This is a program that's called housing for all rather than only the poorest. This is making housing affordability leveled on all scales of income instead of just only for the bottom percent. And Vienna's program isn't perfect, but it allows up to 75% of the population to qualify. That is better than zero, because that is what we're currently at right now. We don't even have a program like this. Yes, we have Section 8, but it's not high quality living. The quality of life of a Section 8 recipient is bare bottom, dude. It is like bottom of the barrel. It is terrible. I'm not saying it's like this across the board for every Section 8 voucher, because some of you guys may disprove me in the comments, but for your average person, the wait lists are years long. Finding landlords who accept these vouchers is extremely difficult, and some voucher recipients even end up in lower quality housing or high crime rate neighborhoods due to the limited options. And even if you do find a quality place, chances are you're in a low opportunity neighborhood where there aren't many jobs available, so you have to commute or travel really far to find anything of quality to just make a living wage. And it's crazy because we actually had this before in America. Public housing in America in the 1940s and 50s was actually high quality standard of living. We effectively just underfunded it and stigmatized it because that's what they want you to do. They want you to attack each other instead of attacking the greed and upper class. We could even strengthen tenant protections or cap rent increases. Although these policies aren't perfect, they prevent the kind of rent spikes that push people to homelessness. Housing should be treated as a right, not a commodity. We need massive public investment into affordable housing, restrictions on corporations, and tenant protections that prevent exploitation. This isn't some radical point of view. This is how most developed countries handle the housing. And another solution that we could even propose is tying wages to productivity and inflation. Wages have been stagnant for just about 50 years, while productivity has increased over 77% and corporate profits have exploded. That's something that's not sustainable. Here's what needs to happen. Raise the federal minimum wage. That's the first thing. Index it to inflation. The federal minimum wage should be at least $15, honestly, realistically closer to $20 an hour when you account for cost of living in most cities. But more importantly, it needs to be automatically adjusted for inflation every single year. So we don't have to have the same argument and same discussion every decade. Over 63% of Americans support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, by the way, and just half of Republicans agree to raise the minimum wage. This isn't some crazy position, it's just common sense. We also need to strengthen unions and collective bargaining rights. Union membership has declined by 35% of workers in the 1950s to just 10% today. As union memberships declined, wage stagnation increased. That's not a weird coincidence. Why do you think Amazon, big banks even, massive wide-scale corporations are trying to demonize or put hush on these unions? Because workers in unions earn 10 to 20% more than non-union workers in the same exact industry and job. They have better benefits, better working conditions, and stronger job security. We need to pass some sort of act which would make it easier for workers to form unions and bargain collectively. In 2021, we almost had something similar, but it just died in the Senate. We could even implement a profit sharing and worker ownership model, which I think most companies should honestly cater towards. If productivity has increased by 77% since the 1970s, workers should share in those gains. Some companies already do this, and their worker retirement accounts have a higher median than the average. We could incentivize this model through tax policy and make it easier for workers to buy ownership stake in their own companies. Because if you are a loyal worker to a company, you do deserve a share in the wealth they create. If companies are making record profits while workers struggle just to afford rent and food, the system is systematically broken. We need to hold corporations accountable. Corporations are laying off workers while making record profits. CEOs are getting richer while workers get poorer. Monopolies control entire industries and crush competition. For example, in 2024, we spent over $1.34 trillion just on stock buybacks. That money went to shareholders instead of the workers. And stock buybacks were illegal until the 1982 because they were considered market manipulation. But now we are spending records amount of money on stock buybacks, and we wonder why wealth inequality is the way it is. We should either ban them altogether or just tax them heavily, just so the government and the people can profit off of these things too. If we just even tax them 10, 20, 30%, we could generate hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue that could fund housing, healthcare, education. We need to break up monopolies and enforce antitrust laws. For example, just four companies control 70% of all beef in America. 3 companies control 63% of the chicken market, and 2 companies control 90% of the beer market in America. Amazon controls 40% of all e-commerce, Google controls 92% of search, and we really only have a few companies control all major social media companies. This isn't competition, this is consolidation, and it hurts workers and consumers. We have these big, massive corporations buy out and acquire other corporations, and then we just turn into a big monopoly. If we just break up some monopolies, block anti-competitive mergers, and enforce antitrust laws that have been in the books for over 100 years but haven't actually been meaningfully enforced in decades, the quality of life for a worker and an average citizen would actually increase. Another thing is requiring corporate transparency and accountability for layoffs. If a company lay off workers while making record profits, there should be consequences to that. Some European countries require companies to justify layoffs and provide generous severance packages. For example, in France, companies must prove economic necessity before conducting a mass layoff. If we just implemented similar protection rights, that would require companies to give workers advance notice, severance pay, and retraining assistance, then I would honestly have no issue with it. If they actually prove economic uncertainty or economic necessity, if they actually try to find other positions for the workers that they are laying off within their company, or try and retrain them into an industry that is more in demand, and even just provide substantial severance pay and give advance notice instead of just being like, oh, you woke up the next day, yeah, you don't have access to your laptop or key card, and you're actually fired. Yikes. But they actually don't even care about you. That's the thing. They just genuinely don't care. They care about what's in their pockets, how much profit are they making, and how big that bonus is going to be. Oh my God, they love it. They see that the mouth for it. The bottom line is corporations have way too much power and not any, honestly, accountability. You need policies that prioritize workers over shareholders. Right now, it's just the opposite. Now, solution 4, I know a lot of you guys are going to attack in the comments over it, which is kind of crazy because it is honestly a basic human necessity and a human right also, but we'll talk about that another day. Healthcare in America is a disaster. We spend more on healthcare than any other country, over $4 trillion per year, by the way, over $13,000 a person, but we actually get worse outcomes. Our life expectancy is worse, and the average family health insurance premiums are over $24,000 per year. Medical debt is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. That might sound familiar to some of you guys who watched my previous video, because it is responsible for over 66% of all bankruptcies. This is insane. Every other developed country has figured out universal healthcare. Canada, the UK, France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, they all provide healthcare to their citizens without bankrupting them. And it's cheaper there. The UK spends about $5.3K per person on healthcare. Germany spends only $7.3K. We spend over $13,000 per citizen with, again, like I said, worse quality, worse outcomes, and a lower life expectancy. We could even implement a Medicare for all system or cut healthcare costs in half while providing better coverage to everyone if we just followed their models. This is nothing that's new to the world. These are things that are already done. I'm not even thinking outside the box. I'm just taking what one country is doing and applying it to our own country because we have the data. We see the systems that work. We see the systems that don't. We see the corruption involved in those systems. Okay, let's take the next step, implement it, and solve those corruptions or solve those loopholes. This is what our representatives, our senators, the president, Congress in general, this is what they should be solving. This is the things that they should be looking at. Instead, they're insider trading. Instead, they're making millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on only a $200,000 salary. Like, how does that work? You make the same amount of money as like the upper class in America, right? Like, let's say they make $200,000. How are you retiring with over 200 million? That's weird. Am I the only one pointing that out, or are we just gonna put that on the down low and just not talk about that? Because if we had healthcare for all in America, by the way, it would actually save us over $450 billion in tax revenue, and also could even prevent up to over 60 to 70,000 deaths per year. Because population collapse is a thing in America. We're not having enough children, so why don't we protect the citizens and the people that are currently alive? Or maybe if we had better healthcare, we would actually want to have kids. Or, you know, if healthcare was affordable, we would be able to afford to have kids and be incentivized to have kids. It's weird because Congress and the president and senators, they talk about these issues, but they don't actually care to solve them. They do this because they're populist. They do it to get votes and to sway the audience into their favor until they just get reelected and then just throw it out the door. Because the bottom line for this is that the healthcare is a human right. Tying it to employment is a disaster, and we need universal healthcare like every other developed country. Because obviously, it's shown that our system is not working. It's fundamentally broken. It's bankrupting our own people. And it's really weird because, again, we attack each other and we're attacking ourselves over these issues because that's what they want us to do, and nobody is seeing that. When you say Republicans versus Democrats, that is not the agenda that should be taught or taken away from a two-party system. You should be working collectively together and actually implement valid solutions for both sides. That's why I think there is a massive fault in a two-party system. I think we should honestly have a multi-party system, one where they're all represented in the government, because what's the difference between two massive corporations owning 70% of the market share or two parties controlling 100% of the market share within our government? Like, does that ring a bell? Does that sound weird? Doesn't that sound monopolistic in some way? We need political reform. The political system is broken because it's captured by wealthy interests. Here's what needs to change. We need to get the money out of the politics. We need to overturn Citizens United and implement public campaign financing. You may be curious what's Citizens United, by the way. It's a Supreme Court case that ruled political spending by corporations, unions, and other groups is a form of protected free speech under the First Amendment. This decision allows these organizations to spend unlimited amounts of money on independent political expenditures. Like, this case had a massive impact on campaign financing, and it led to a surge in spending by these outside corporations and groups. worse. Isn't that weird? For example, this had massive impacts in our past few elections. These super PACs and corporations spent billions and billions of dollars. Like, we need a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United and implement public financing of these elections so candidates don't have to be millionaires or sell out to wealthy donors to run for office. We also need to implement term limits and age limits for Congress. The average age of someone in Congress is over 59 years old. It's the oldest it's ever been in US history. So we had an entire generation vote themselves in, and now they're just holding on to power and keeping our and other generations out of it. Doesn't that sound weird? It sounds like they had a ladder, they climbed it, then pushed the ladder down just so nobody else can climb it. That sounds a little weird. Or they had an open door, they took the open door and closed it and locked it behind them so nobody else is allowed in. If we had term limits to prevent career politicians from staying in office for 40 plus years and losing touch with the people they once represented, wouldn't that be helpful in any sort of way? And honestly, instead of just term limits, we probably need an age limit too. We have minimum ages to serve. For example, 25 for the House, 30 for the Senate, 35 to be president. There should be a maximum too. Maybe even putting it at 65 or 70, like retirement age. Because wouldn't they just vote for things that benefit themselves even more? It's not some sort of ageism. It's just ensuring that the people making decisions about the future actually have to live in that said future. And it's kind of weird because we also don't really have many voter rights, and also we don't really make voting accessible. The US actually has a very low turnout rate compared to other developed nations. Ours is somewhere in the 60s. Meanwhile, Belgium is 87, Sweden's 87, and Australia is 91. Voting is easy and accessible to all. We need the restoration of voting rights for formerly incarcerated people. We need a universal either vote by mail or some sort of actual verifiable system, because I know there's a lot of problems with that too. Election day should be a national holiday. Everybody should be able to have off of work or the freedom to leave work to vote, and maybe we should have some automatic voter registration list so everybody is registered and everybody is accessible and has access to vote. We need to redo the entire voter registration thing itself too, because there is a lot of privacy concerns and there's a lot of things that is publicly available that maybe shouldn't be publicly available. Like, for example, your political party, that is something that is publicly available. You can search up anybody's online. That's a problem. That's not okay. I think we need some protections in that form. I really do think that voting in general should be completely redone, because there obviously is some sort of fraud, and a lot of that is done at a state level and even on a federal level. Actually, it's done on both levels, let's be real. And even when you do vote for people, we have the Electoral College and Senate, which disproportionately give less power to lower populated states. Like, for example, Wyoming has one electoral college vote for just 193,000 people, when California has one per 732,000 people. That means a vote in Wyoming nearly has 4 times the amount of power in California. That's not really democracy. And this gets even worse when you talk about the Senate, because the proportions for a Senate seat in California representing 1/20th, or even, I think it's even less than 1/20th at this point. It might even be 1/40th, or even worse than 1/40th than a person in Wyoming. You need to either abolish or reform these institutions to actually create representation. And this isn't some vote blue narrative. I'm just using California as an example because they're one of the highest populated states. I think everybody should have equal representation no matter where they originate from. And for the people that are protecting the political system that was designed in the 1700s, we are in a completely different world. It needs major reform to function in an actual democracy and in the actual state of the world today. Just because we were the world's superpower for over 100 plus years doesn't mean that we will continue to be just because of America. Now, I think we're on solution 6 or something, but we need to make education affordable and accessible for all. The student debt crisis is crushing an entire generation, specifically my generation, and honestly, Gen Alpha might even have it worse than us, because total student loan debt in America is over $1.8 trillion and over 43 million borrowers. And the average borrower owes over $37,000. This is something that's unsustainable, and this is something that needs to happen to fix this. We need to make public college tuition free. way. Germany did it, Finland did it, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, all free or nearly free. And even in the 1960s, when we talk about the boomers, by the way, many US state universities were actually tuition free or extremely affordable and accessible. Isn't that weird that that got pulled back? Isn't it weird that an entire generation benefited from these things and then now we're struggling from those same issues that they actually had once resolved? The cost of making all public colleges and universities tuition free, by the way, would only be about $79 billion. That is a drop in the hat when we were talking about tax revenue, when we're talking about how much money we send to other countries, when we are talking about any form of foreign aid or military spending. Like maybe we don't need another aircraft carrier and instead we just spend that money on making all public universities free. I think that sounds pretty fair, right? It sounds like a lot until you realize that over 10 times the amount is spent on defense every year. So just a 10% efficiency in the defense budget, or just a 10% reduction if you want to go hardcore with it, would fund free college for everybody, but it's honestly a choice that we don't. Now, I know the Biden administration really went for a push of canceling student loan debt, and I think he actually did cancel around 10% of the debt, but we need broader cancellations or broader reform to make debt payment easier. Even if you don't support completely canceling that amount of debt, let's reform how that debt is structured. Some people say debt cancellation is unfair to people who've already paid off their loans. And for example, I paid off school while going through it. I worked the entire 4 years of college. I even commuted to school to make it cheaper and make it more accessible to me. And to be honest, I wouldn't want to wish that on anybody else because it was actually miserable. It's pretty much selling 4 years of my entire life, 24/7, spending it on school, spending it on work, going back to school, because I had to commute over an hour to school too, because that was the closest university. That was actually affordable. But if we also use that logic and turn it on its head, we could even say, why would we cure a disease because someone already died from it? So this person died from cancer, why should we cure cancer? Like that's like the argument kind of, there's a lot of nuance to it. Progress isn't unfair. It's called progress. Instead, I really want to hit the core issues. Instead of just wide cancellations, I propose, why don't we just fix the for-profit college industry? For example, for-profit colleges enroll 9% of students, but account for 35% of the loan defaults. Sounds like a broken system. And again, like I said, public universities were once free. Why don't we just make them free? Kids would have more options. Kids wouldn't want to go to these for-profit colleges if it costs money. Meanwhile, public and state universities would be completely for free. This would cause a core issue. This isn't just a patch on a massive issue. This isn't just a band-aid on a wound. This is actually solving predatory institutional lures for low-income students because they are giving them false promises, but saddling them with debt in the background and providing near worthless degrees. Like, I think these colleges and these institutions need heavy regulation, or we either just shut down the entire for-profit colleges entirely. Because why are we gatekeeping and profiting off education, again, making the wealth inequality and gap even wider for people that aren't accessible to these things compared to people that of course have unlimited accessibility because they are born with so much more money. Like one take that I'm just going to interject here, I think one person born in middle of nowhere versus one person born in the middle of the city, like obviously their lives are going to be completely unproportional and it's not going to be fair or balanced. But these kids should have the same opportunity to thrive in an educational environment because they can't choose where they were born. They can't choose the household they lived in. But one thing they can choose on, if we actually made it accessible, is their career paths and education and how much they want to learn and how much effort they actually want to put in. And I'm not saying everybody has to be a doctor. I'm saying everybody should thrive to learn more and actually pursue education. And if we give you the resources and you don't take it seriously, well, obviously you're probably going to be a low-income earner. But if you take advantage of those free paths, you take advantage of the accessibility, and you are actually, again, putting full amount of effort and putting the actual resources to the test, you do deserve to be compensated and rewarded for that. But instead, it's not an even playing field. It's not accessible. It's not free. It's not even affordable. And not everyone needs a 4-year degree. We can invest in trade schools, apprenticeships, vocational training programs that lead directly to good paying jobs. Like Germany has an insane program where almost 60% of German students go through an apprenticeship. They graduate with near no debt, actually no debt at all, and immediately have job placement or have the tools and resources to work a job and qualify for one. We could implement a similar system here. Education should be an investment in our future, not a debt entrapment. Every other country has figured this out. We can too. Again, there are working systems in the world today. Why don't we literally just cherry pick what works, fix what doesn't, and actually apply it to our own citizens and country? And I'm saying that question because I want you to question it, not because I don't know the answer to it, because I do know the answer to it. It's greed and corruption. And now let's get to the seventh solution. We need to strengthen worker protections and labor rights. American workers have fewer protections than workers in almost any other developed country. Here's something that needs to change. We need to mandate paid family leave. The United States is one of only 6 developed countries in the world with no national paid family leave. Out of Canada, the UK, France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, they get paid parental leave for new parents. And the average is 18 weeks along those countries, right? We get 0. At a federal level, it is 0. I say we need at least 12 weeks. That should be the bare minimum. Even if we choose the lower end of the average of developed countries, if we just hit 12, I think that is a progress. Realistically, I think it should be like 16 to 24. And we're just talking about paid family leave here. I'm not even talking about mandating paid sick leave and vacation time, because this is something that needs to be refixed and rebuilt also. The US is the only developed country with no federal requirement for paid vacation or sick leave. European countries mandate 20 to 30 days of paid vacation per year. We mandate 0. Honestly, I think 30 is even low because that's only like less than 10% of days in a year. And by the way, even if you do get wronged by your employer, actually over 60 million people can't even sue their employers for wage theft, discrimination, or harassment because of arbitration and non-compete agreements. Like 18% of workers can't actually even take better jobs in their own industry because of things that they sign once they first get hired. And I'm not going to lie, half you guys probably don't even read that. Both of these practices should be completely illegal. Workers should have the right to sue employers and the right to take a better job. Like, don't you think it's weird that even gig workers don't want to classify employees as employees, like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and other gig economy companies? They've spent over $200 million fighting legislation that would classify their workers as employees. Why, you may ask? Because they would get a minimum wage, overtime pay, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, and independent contractors get none of that. For example, California almost passed something to reclassify gig workers as actual paid employees, but then they overturned it because $200 million flew in and it went hush. We need federal legislation that protects gig workers and ensures they actually have the same right and benefit as other employees. Workers have been stripped of their protections over the past 50 years. We need to restore them, expand upon them to match workers in other developed countries because they already have it and we aren't even there yet. We aren't even close to competing. If we were a business, if we were a company, we would honestly be failing. So what can you actually do about it? Those are the actual solutions. Real systematic change that would actually fix the problem Gen Z is facing. Like, what can you as an individual actually do about it? Because these aren't things that will happen automatically. They require political pressure, organizing, and collective action. Here's what you can start off doing. Vote in every election, especially local elections. National elections get all the attention, but local elections matter just as much, maybe even more. Your city councils control zoning laws that determine housing costs. Your state legislation controls minimum wage, tenant protection, workers' rights. Your school board controls education funding. Turnout in local elections is as low as 10 to 20%. That means your vote has 5 to 10 times more power in a local election than in national ones. Heavily researched candidates find out who supports housing reform, higher wages, universal health care, worker protections, vote for them. Don't just vote for a president every 4 years. Vote in every election, primaries, midterms, local elections. That's how change actually happens. Support pro-worker, pro-housing, and pro-healthcare candidates. Not all politicians are the same. Some are bought and paid for by corporate donors. Others are actually fighting for workers. The ones being backed by corporate donors obviously heavily get more voted for because of the propaganda that they spread, and the ones that are actually fighting barely get any attention. We need to flip the script on that. Look at candidates' funding sources too. Do they take corporate PAC money? Who are their biggest donors? There are websites out there that research candidate funding, and if a top donor is like a pharmaceutical company, they're probably not going to fight for your best interests. We need to support candidates who refuse corporate PAC money. Support Medicare for all or universal health care or some form of healthcare reform. Support housing reform and tenant protections. Support raising the minimum wage and strengthening unions. Support making college more affordable. And support getting money out of politics. Don't just vote for them. You can even volunteer for their campaigns. Talk to your friends and family about them. Also, join or support unions. If your workplace has a union, join it. If it doesn't, try to organize one. Union workers earn 10 to 20% more than non-union workers. They have a better benefits, better working conditions, and stronger job security. Just statistically, it is better to be in a union than not. Organizing a union is hard, yes. I'm not going to try and fight you on that one because companies will already be fighting you on that. It's legal, and there are resources to help you out there on the internet. Reach out to established unions in your industry, and they will even help you and get guidance on organizing one for your own. Even if you're not ready to organize one in your own workplace, you can support unions by supporting strikes and worker actions, talking positively about unions to counter the anti-union propaganda that's been spread all over the country. This is something so small, but can be so impactful in the future and down the line. You can also even get involved in local organizing efforts. Real change happens through organized groups, not individual acting alone. You join or support local organizations that support housing reform, labor rights, healthcare advocacy, political reform. You find these organizations in your area and you get involved. You show up to meetings. You can even volunteer. You don't have to agree with everything these groups do, but getting involved in organized movements is how you create actual change. And number 5, you can even talk to people, especially people who disagree with you. A lot of these solutions have broad public support, raising the minimum wage, lowering drug prices, making college more affordable. Some of these approval odds are over 60%. Even Republicans agree with these views. It's not just the Democratic Party that agrees with some of these issues. And I'm not saying you have to vote one way or another, because to be honest, the current political candidates that we have are corrupt on both sides. I personally don't like them. I think both parties are struggling. I think both parties have fundamental issues, and there's massive collusion and corruption on both sides. That's something we need to fix and have candidates that are not run by these two parties actually be voted for and advocated for. We need to tear down that stigma. I don't think it's going to be an immediate thing. It's not going to be like an independent winning the next election or another party winning the next election. But if we slowly make progress towards it, eventually it will happen. It's crazy because the problem isn't even that people disagree on certain policies. Like, I think we can collectively find things that both parties agree on. It's that we're divided by like this cultural war while the wealthy is just robbing us blindly. Like, talk to your friends, your family members, your coworkers about these issues. Don't be preachy or like condescending. Just have real conversations about these problems. This is like a slow spread of awareness. Like when parents complain that young people can't afford homes and are living with them forever, talk about corporate investors buying up housing and zoning laws preventing construction. When coworkers complain about health insurance costs, talk about how every other country provides healthcare for half the cost. When your friend complains about student loans, talk about how college was affordable for previous generations and it could be again. And that's why I'm such a big advocacy of community college and public universities, because that's the route that I chose and I was able to graduate debt free. Yes, I had to work through college, but community college was super affordable. I was able to pay for college, nearly get it for free, and still come out with a valuable degree at the same level as another student at a state university. These issues are not partisan. Don't make them that way either. Make it about class, because that's what it is. It's the rich versus the poor, the workers versus the owners, people who want a fair system versus people who benefit from an unfair system. You frame it that way, you'll find a lot more agreement than you actually expect. We need to build alternative institutions. While fighting for systematic change, we can also build alternatives to the system that are failing us. For example, like starting worker cooperatives where employees own the business and share in the profits. This may not be the most profitable business idea, but if you actually create a fair system where workers are happy, you will be more productive. You will have higher workplace happiness. And in the end, you actually will probably make more money. Your business will be more successful if employees actually want to show up every single day to work. Just because your pockets aren't going to be padded doesn't mean that collectively all of your pockets can't be padded. These aren't just substitutes for policy change, but they are ways to build power and improve lives right now while we're fighting for the bigger change. Another massive step that you could do even on a small scale, that's so much easier than all these things, is just support independent media and content creators. Corporate media doesn't cover these issues, honestly. They're funded by the same corporations that benefit from the current broken system. You support independent journalists, YouTubers, podcasters, writers who are covering hearing these issues honestly. Subscribe, share their work. That's how we build alternative information ecosystems that aren't controlled by billionaires. And another one is just don't give up. This is the most important one because change is going to be slow. It's frustrating. You'll lose more than you win, especially at first, but it's not impossible. We've won before. Reform has been happening in other countries. We can do the same here. Workers once fought for an 8-hour workday and we eventually won. They fought for weekends and won. They fought for child labor laws and eventually won. They fought for the minimum wage and they won. They fought for Social Security and they won. Every right workers have today have won through organizing, strikes, and political pressure. None of it was just given to them freely. We can win again, but only if we fight for it. Gen Z is the largest generation in American history that's educated, more diverse, and more politically engaged than other previous generations. If we organize, we can change everything. We need to work as a collective, vote, show up, organize, talk to others, build a movement. It's not easy, but it is possible. For me personally, I am trying to do these things while I am here in America, but my plan overall is to not just stay in America altogether. Fundamentally, this country is broken. I'm honestly just don't want to be a part of the culture anymore. And even though this is the land of opportunity, this is the best country to make money in, I do think there is a better life out there in other countries. And that is what I'm aiming towards. I don't care about making the most amount of money in my entire life. I don't care about some of the certain qualities of life that we have here and the capitalist society that we built ourselves around and the consumerism. I don't care about stuff. I just want to live a life that's fulfilling, worth living, that's filled with happiness, joy, that's filled with time freedom, financial freedom, less stress than the everyday that we have to currently go through. And that is what I'm building on this channel. That is why we are called Early Exit Plan, because I'm actively building an early exit plan to leave the country, to break free from this system, to break free from the curse that we were all indebted and born into. And if that sounds interesting to you, you can check out the links in the description down below. We have the Discord link, which is a massive active community of over 1,200 members talking about these issues, actually advocating for change, talking about investing and how we can actually build a financially freedom future for ourselves, our financial independence. For those that are interested, how we can leave the country and actually build independence for our own futures. Even though I do talk about a lot of individual life hacks on this channel, this video was a very different one because it's actually talking about being a collective instead of broken apart in a broken system. And I know we hate hearing the advice, just work harder, or just sitting there hoping things will get better. This video was about something different. It's about what's Gen Z's solution to these issues, because I know majority of you guys plan to stay in this country. Personally, just because I won't be doesn't mean that I won't hope for a better future for it. I would love one day to be able to come back after fighting for change, after voicing my opinion and seeing these things actually become a reality. These aren't radical ideas. And for those that think so, you are obviously not the target audience for my channel. And I genuinely hope you do not join our community because you are not the target audience here. This is just somebody speaking common sense through what every other developed country has and has already done. They're working out what works and taking it and extracting it and using it for our own solution. The reason we don't have them isn't because they're impossible. It's because the people in power benefit from not having it. They benefit from the current system, but we outnumber them by a lot. If Gen Z organizes, if we vote, if we join unions, if we support pro-worker like candidates, if we support and build movements, we can change everything. This isn't hopium. This isn't just having naive optimism. This is history. Every major social change in America has happened because ordinary people organized and demanded it. We can do the same. And just because I don't plan on being here in the long term doesn't mean I won't be doing these things while I am here. Doesn't mean that I can't be doing this from a remote location. But if you are tired of being told to work harder while everything else gets more expensive, then join us. I hope you click that subscribe button, click the like button to support this video, leave a comment, join our Discord, and there is a buy me a coffee link in the description down below if you would like to donate and support the channel even further. If you're tired of watching corporations get richer while workers get poor, join us. If you're tired of political systems that don't represent you, join us. Comment below with what you're doing to fight for change, share organizations you're involved with. Let's build this movement together. And if you want to keep having these conversations, like I said, join the Discord community, the link's in the description, watch other videos, subscribe to the channel. It's crazy that we've even grown to a community of over 1,200 people in the Discord and over 10,000 on this channel alone, which I am extremely grateful for, and I thank all of you for it. I started this channel just in August, and the fact that we've grown so massively so fast is insane to me. This is a community of people talking about organizing and bettering our future together. These are the conversations Gen Z needs to be having, not just complaining about problems, but building real solutions and fighting for systematic change. I know some of you guys want to hear my opinion on this, and I know it's something that I haven't really talked about a lot on the channel. I only have 12 other videos, in fact, and a lot of those other videos are really talking about my individual plan to escape this current system and this rat race. But this is also a conversation just equally as worth having, and I think is equally as important. And that is going to be all for today. We will talk again soon. And again, thank you for 10,000 subscribers. I appreciate all of you. Peace.